Question: how can we develop discernment about differentiating fallen beings from the ascended masters? Is it just about looking at what the fallen beings do, such as draining our energy? You said you can tell if they come from the mental plane. What gives it away? Well, first of all, I think we need to realize something very important. That is that discernment is not the intellectual, logical, rational, analytical mind. It is not that. Discernment is not about setting up criteria. You have a list. Then you evaluate a certain being. Does she do this? Does she do that? Check, check, check. And if he lives up to the criteria, then it's an ascended master, and if not, it's a fallen being. It's not about that. So it's a more direct comparison. You can say that you could potentially grow up and you had not tasted an apple. So you learn there's something called apples, and now you're studying the topic of apples. And you're studying descriptions of what the apple tastes like. But you still haven't tasted the apple. And so you may build some intellectual understanding of what an apple tastes like, but it's never going to be the same as you take the apple, you take a bite, and now you experience. So discernment, building discernment, is about experience. And as I've said before, if you have never encountered an ascended master, you don't have a direct experience of what an ascended master is like, what their consciousness is like. Now, you have encountered fallen beings because if you're grown up on earth, you have heard about, you may not have met them personally, but you have heard about, and maybe even seen on TV or read about it in books, fallen beings. Hitler, Stalin, Mao, many others. Many famous leaders, world leaders, have been fallen beings. And so you have an experience of that. So in order to build discernment, the only real way here is to come to the point where you have a direct experience of an ascended master. Now, many spiritual people have already had that, but many people aren't aware of it. They aren't aware of what it is. But you can become aware. And I met many spiritual people who, for example, myself, I had intuitive experiences all of my life. But I didn't have the concept of ascended masters. I knew, even when I was a child, I knew there were certain beings. I mean, there's no question about it. I always felt there was some spiritual, non-physical presence that was always there and that was benign. But I didn't know that it was an ascended master, and I didn't have really a clear understanding of it. So for many spiritual people, it can be helpful to learn about ascended masters, learn what they are, and you often realize, hey, but I've had contact, I've had experiences with the masters all of my life. Now, if you haven't had it, and you can be spiritual without having had it, you can go through a process using their teachings, invoking spiritual light, studying the teachings, listening to these dictations that the masters give, and you can come to a point where you have that intuitive experience of the presence, the being of an ascended master. And once you have that, then you have a frame of reference. Because you can feel, you can experience that the masters don't have any intent of controlling you, influencing you, forcing you, taking energy from you, manipulating you, confusing you, fooling you. You can just experience there's a totally pure intent of just helping you grow or just having you experience love. Whereas with the fallen beings, you can also learn to see they always have an agenda. They always have an intent. They want something from you. They want you to do something. There is this element of force. It can be subtle. It can be in terms of illusion. But you can learn to recognize there is something there that pushes on you, pulls on you, confuses you. And there isn't that from the Ascended Masters. So as I've explained, we have the outer personality, the 3 levels of the mind, the emotional, mental, identity level. We have all of these subconscious selves. But the core of our being is the conscious you. And the conscious you has the ability to step outside all of this outer personality and have an experience of being outside your normal state of mind. And when you have that experience, they can take different forms. You can, for example, experience that you are just pure awareness. You are not the outer personality. Compared to the outer personality, you are pure awareness, because you have no specific personality. But you can also experience your higher self. You can also experience the ascended masters in the spiritual realm. And really, the only way to discern between an ascended master and a fallen being is by having that direct experience of the ascended master, so you can directly compare the experiences. And as I said, you feel there is no intent from the ascended masters, but there is an intent from the fallen beings. And the question also asks, I have said in other videos that I can read vibration, and many spiritual people can read vibration. It's not that I'm special about it, but all spiritual people can learn to do it. And I can, for example, tell if they're from the mental plane, or from the low identity, or even from of course, the emotional realm. And that's just a matter of, again, having had the experiences I've had of the presence of ascended masters, you can very easily read that here's a lower vibration, here's an intent. And the mental, if you take beings in the emotional realm, they're very aggressive, trying to influence you emotionally by scaring you, for example. So they often work through fear. But in the mental realm, they often work through confusing you. And they often have this very, quote-unquote, sophisticated intellectual reasoning. And really, it's very complicated. It's very convoluted. For example, you can see some channelings out there. They give this very complex teaching where it can often be hard. You can read a sentence, for example, 3 times, and then you're saying, what are they trying to say with this sentence? What is actually being said here? And they're not trying to say anything. They're trying to confuse you intellectually so that you don't know what to think. And therefore, you think, oh, well, I have to submit to this being or to this guru because I can't know on my own. But as I said, we all have access to the Christ mind within us. And it's through that we can actually know what is of the one mind and what is of the separate mind. So, and then you can, of course, have the fallen beings or the dark forces in the identity realm that are even more subtle, trying to confuse you with your sense of identity that you are not really a spiritual being, or you don't have the potential to manifest personal Christhood, or you don't have the potential to reach a higher state of consciousness. You should just be satisfied with being at a certain level and not go beyond it. For example, always being a follower who's following a guru, never rising to where you are personally have personal Christhood. So you can learn to see that. You can see the intent. I think, obviously the emotional is easy to see when they're directing some kind of fear or anger at you. But it's also fairly easy to see the mental, and it's so unclear what they're saying. They're trying to confuse you. And then even the identity, you can learn to see that they're actually seeking to manipulate your sense of identity to make you accept a lower sense of identity, deny that you have a higher potential.